just a Western problem. They are present globally, so we have to address it immediately. We must understand that there's no shame in having OCD or any other mental illness. We must understand that mental health diseases do not make us weak. It makes us human. We must understand that speaking about mental health makes us stronger, more accepting, and more empowered. It is not a race-specific issue. It is not a person-specific issue or even a gender-specific issue. It is of universal relevance and importance. Thank you.
You gave us a lot of education on what OCD is and what it is not, the myths associated with it, and the fact that not only did you overcome it, that you also have built an application which will help several hundreds of thousands of people overcome it. More importantly, you also raised among all of us here the awareness to mental health issues and the fact that there should be no stigma attached to any of them. It's very important, and it's disheartening to see that it takes 11 years for someone to approach help. Just like we shouldn't wait for dengue to really hit us bad before we go to a doctor, and then it may be too late. So also in the case of mental health illness. What I'd like to do is I'd like all of us to give a huge round of applause to Kaajal, and then we will begin her. Let's begin our question and answer sessions. We'll take about 3 or 4 questions so that she can try and answer them. We'll also check your levels of participation. I'm sure several of you are still processing this information that's come. Anyone to start with? Yep, there we go. Amita ji has a question.
Kaajal, my question is that when you're in school and you see, my question has 2 parts actually. One is you see children around you who are different, and how do you feel? And secondly, the children look at you and they think that, oh, there's something wrong with her. How do they react with you? This is before class 8, before you became aware that there was a problem.
So I didn't really notice a lot about other people before class 8. I don't think many people really did. They didn't have much awareness about mental illnesses. But I've seen a lot of people using these kind of terms in a very cavalier fashion, throwing about words like bipolar and OCD and panic attacks and those kinds of things for smaller issues, especially they're just moody or such. But I have not seen that many people who have had mental health disorders, especially because many people feel scared about sharing it with other people, and they try to suppress it, especially at school. So, but generally, we wouldn't have been I can speak from experience that we wouldn't have been too accepting before class 8 because we didn't have as much awareness about it. But if we were educated about things such as this, then we would have been more accepting, and more people would have come forward and talked about it. But for other people looking at me and thinking that I am different, I tried to suppress all of my compulsions at school. And if I did do it, I tried to do it whenever no one was around. I'm not sure if many people actually saw me, but I was just afraid of people considering me to be a freak, or some people considering me to be different, because no child wants to be distinguished in that way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other question? We can take another 2 more questions, I guess.
This to your mom. Hi. I would just like to hear from you that I'm sure that it is a lot of courage which is there, basically, which helped her to stand where she is right now. What would be some 2 or 3 points which you would want to give as an advice in terms of if any such situation occur, then what is the support which is provided by you? Because I think that is most important.
About being different. It's very important to be one of the, you don't want to be classified as a freak. That's always a question. And as she mentioned, it was her sister who noticed. I realized she was acting strange. She was acting very sad. She used to be. Then later I realized she was constantly washing her hands, but she was inside the bathroom for a long time. Her sister told me that she's showing symptoms of OCD. Then I tried to find help within Bangalore. were not able to do as much of a job, but she was very perceptive to everything that we were suggesting. As Kaajal said, ERP didn't work very well for her. The other technique were what we call where she would try to resist not completing the compulsion. So I got several books and read about it, and most important thing I think that helped her more than my saying anything was, I encouraged her to tell some of her best friends. And when her friends didn't think much about it, they said, even if you do that, you're still our friend, you're still one of us. And so that kind of made the phantom much smaller, and that really, really helped her recovery. So I think just being open, tune into what the kids are doing, and till she started showing the symptoms, I would have never gone to a therapist before. I didn't really think that much about it. After that, now anybody says that, I said it's important. Like we mentioned, if our child has fever, we would run 10 different places to make sure it's cured. If somebody looks sad, don't say get over it. There might be a problem. They might need help. That's all. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else with a question?
Clinical trials as such. So I was just trying to understand what would be the procedure for it to be approved as such.
Clinical trials are finished, that information would be available. But right now, I don't think I'm allowed to speak about it.
Okay, thanks.
We've been talking about students and children. This is not something limited to students alone, right? It would be for elders, for adults, etc.
Could you repeat that?
This is not something limited to students, or
No, it's not.
it can be
for
anyone.
everyone. Yeah.
So how does one identify? Is there a habit and OCD? You know, at what point, how identify whether is it?
Okay. I think it's much greater than that associated with a habit. And for a habit, people actually genuinely want to do it. They don't feel like they're not in control of themselves. They don't feel like they must do it or else something really bad will happen. So, but people with OCD, they don't have that kind of same control. They feel like I must do this or else I will feel bad for the rest of my life, or I'll feel guilty for the rest of my life, or everyone I know will die, those kinds of thoughts. So, I mean, there's a difference between mild and severe OCD, but there's still, even with mild OCD, there's still that same thought process. You have to identify that same vicious cycle, first of all. And I mean, there's no really, like, you can't really diagnose yourself with OCD, or no one else can do that. Only a professional therapist can do that. So, I mean, that's the only, after you identify your habit as OCD, then a therapist should diagnose it. I mean, the tests don't really determine anything. They're not accurate, but I don't really recommend using them anyways. But maybe not for diagnosing OCD, maybe to see the severity of it rather while doing therapy, such as like, there's something called the Yale-Brown Obsessive Compulsive Scale, or the OCIR. And those tests can be used in a professional setting to measure the severity of OCD after certain stages of therapy.
Changes the way you are in your day-to-day life. Like she gave the example of the gas being switched off. I go sometimes 2-3 times to check if I've switched off. But then once I reach work, I don't keep thinking about it. If I kept thinking about it whole day, I might need help.
Yeah.
I hope that is correct.
We can probably take one more question if any of you have it.
Thanks for doing this noble work. Your video was quite fast, so could you throw some light on how that app is actually helping someone affected with OCD?
Sure. So track the number of compulsions which they do per day and then see the progress from that. Then they can also add obsessions, and then subsequent compulsions, which are as a result of those obsessive thoughts, and kind of lay those kind of basic framework down easily. And then there are diary entries which they can make regarding their anxiety and their emotions felt during the day or during a particular situation, which like a lot of therapists recommend generally doing. But there's a lot of problems with privacy and such, so I included that in the app. Then there's goal setting, which is a common cognitive behavioral practice, which I found very helpful. And then there is exposure response prevention therapy, which in the fear ladder, in which the user can add triggers for their obsessive thoughts, and then they can do an exercise such as recording themselves talking about their obsessive thought and then trying not to do a compulsion afterwards. And they'll normalize the thought process for them and show them what it's like without doing the compulsion. Then there is resisting exercises, such as postponing your own compulsions, which I actually used. So in which the user can postpone when they're going to do compulsion by 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then see that by doing a more productive activity instead. And then they can see that nothing bad's going to happen again. So it's actually fundamentally ERP, but it's different methods of doing that. Then there's also thought exercises, because a lot of people with OCD, they need to actually see how their thoughts are going. They need to actually lay out the vicious cycle easily to see where it's going wrong, where it's faulty. And I took a few different thought exercises called CBT exercises I found online and with the help of psychologists, and I included that in the app. And then there's also a lot of resources, like knowledge resources on OCD, which can help them learn more about it. And there's also a safety plan in which they can lay out what's going to happen if who they should contact if they get a lot of obsessive thoughts at once, or like if they want to contact their parents or their therapist, stuff like that. Then there's also a feature called a worry time, in which they kind of segregate like 10 minutes in a day to focusing on their own obsessive thoughts. And not worry about that during other times. A lot of my users have said that was a very useful feature. And yeah, it also connects them to their therapist through emails. That's basically what the app is. It has a lot of different features.
Yeah, and I think like Vidya observed and sent me a message, it's also the cutest ghost. So I think thought with us. Yeah. Remember, it's never easy to come and share your experience and not just face a problem, but to be bold enough to try and solve it, not just for oneself, but to think much larger than that. At such a young age, I'm sure you have lots and lots of places to go, and you'll not just be an OCD fighter, you'll be a champion in many, many different ways. All of us here who have come here from Saskin and those who didn't attend, extend our best wishes to you, and hope that you will reach the best levels of fame that you want to achieve. Small memento from our side. We're so proud to give this to you, our youngest ever recipient.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, one and all.